Autoline After Hours is brought to you by Bridgestone Tires, your journey, our passion, and by the all-new 2015 Jeep Renegade.
This is Autoline After Hours with John McElroy, episode 289 for May 29th of 2015. The top automotive brands and Tesla scam. Watch Autoline After Hours live at Autoline.tv every Thursday at 3 p.m. Eastern Time. That's 12 p.m. Pacific or 19 hours GMT. You can subscribe to this podcast for free by searching for Autoline in iTunes, Stitcher, or YouTube. Mr. Vasilash.
McElroy, how are you?
I'm doing pretty good.
Great.
Yeah.
Good to see you.
Yeah, it's getting towards the end of the week, and I always feel better when we get towards the end of the week.
And summer's starting, and
yeah,
it's going to be good.
It is. Hey, we got to tell everybody about the other two galoots we got here in the studio with us. Todd Lassa from Automobile Magazine.
Oh, John.
I got it right. Finally, I said the right magazine because I've got it written down here right in front of me.
It helps that galoot number 2 is from my old magazine.
That's right.
I only have Todd's old job.
Well, you know, I'm not sure.
Field and Stream?
Yeah. You know, it sounds like Scott Burgess from Motor Trend, but it doesn't look like Scott Burgess from Motor Trend. Where's the beard and the long hair, man?
Well, I got it. The beard had too much gray, and I just decided it had to go.
Yep.
And the hair, I'd get it cut every 6 months, whether I need it or not.
Just like brushing your teeth, right?
Yep.
So it's the new youthful Scott Burgess.
Yeah. Well, and you know, to taking Todd's job, you know, most people in the PR side haven't changed their ID on their phone numbers. And quite often when I called somebody yesterday, and they're like, "Hey, Todd Lassa," and you're like, I see you haven't updated your phone list in over 2 years.
So last week on the show, before we left, and we were talking about how you were going to be going to Indianapolis, and you were going to be seeing the race in Indianapolis.
Right.
But I understand that there was a race earlier this week in Detroit, that you had a little something to do with. So before we talk about Indianapolis, because we know that one of our colleagues was there as well, why don't you tell us about this race that you happened to be victorious in?
Yeah. So, you know, one of our colleagues who passed away way too young, Doug Guthrie, former car critic at the Detroit News. You guys know him.
Good guy, yeah.
Good guy.
Been on the show?
Been on the show and everything like that, and boom, dropped dead of a heart attack, I think it was. So a number of people in town organized this go-kart race at Kart to Kart, which has got some decent go-karts, indoor facility, so you can race all year long in it. And they got a sponsor, Quicken Loans, which is big here. Oh, look, we got some video up there. Where did they get that? Unbelievable. So anyway, they organized this race. Penske's people are involved with it. It's all sort of tied in with the Grand Prix, and they call it the Doug Guthrie Memorial Grand Prix. And there was about 30 journos and other people that all got together, and through a process of qualifying and timing, we whittled it down to, I say we, all I got out there was to drive. So they got down to sort of a preliminary final race for the second top 10 group, and then the final top 10 people were in it. And it's amazing. You know, I love driving fast. I love go-karts and all that, but I don't do this stuff very often. I mean, the last time I was out there was a couple of years ago. And so I get there, and all these young hot shoes show up. They're about half my age. They all have their custom painted helmets. They've all got their racing gloves. They even have racing shoes. Some of them had like this sort of chest protector, rib protector, back protector thing. And I thought, John, you're going to get your ass kicked here. And lo and behold, in the first quali, I turned the fourth best time. In the second quali, I got the third best time. So I started third on the grid. They dropped the green flag. There was some sort of kerfuffle on the first turn, and I come out in the lead. And I thought, just keep your head about you, keep your head down, and just go. and never made a mistake and came home first and got a trophy for it.
It was the Nico Rosberg strategy, apparently.
Yeah.
I love that place. Cart to Cart's fabulous.
Yeah, in fact, we got some of the
He
video.
did have a Nico Rosberg moment there. I think there's the trophy that you won.
Yeah.
And, at some point,
And that was just basically a reenactment of the Indy 500.
Here we go.
Oh, yeah, here we go.
There we are.
They said, okay, McElroy, we got a battle of champagne there, and they were all impressed.
Comes out slow.
I knew how to
Look
spray
at
the
that.
thing.
Boy,
I'm going to have to get an invite for next year. Will that be a yearly thing?
It is a yearly thing. This
Okay.
was the second annual.
Oh, second.
Last year, Bud Denker from Penske won the thing, and Bud was in it again this year, too. It was a hoot. It was a lot of fun. Everybody had a great time. Doug Guthrie's wife and kids were there. In fact, his daughter won the race before mine. And there's a picture of Doug up there. And he's a guy, interestingly, who spent almost all of his career as a court and cop reporter.
Yeah.
And then, I don't know, was that about the time that you left,
When I
Scott?
left, he replaced me. And
Yeah, and but the word I got is they went around the Detroit news staff saying, "Hey, who wants to be a car critic?" And he raised his hand.
He's covering motorsports.
Oh, was he?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
So he was in the sports department at the time and writing some stuff about racing and things like that. And it was always been a car nut. So
Yeah, but I remember him reporting on stuff like when Kwame Kilpatrick,
sure.
disgraced and now prisoner, disgraced former mayor of Detroit and now prisoner, and Doug did a lot of that reporting.
Yeah, he did. Yeah, I used to belong to a league racing at Cart to Cart, but that was about 15 years and 20 pounds ago. And, it makes a lot of difference.
Harder weight's a lot. That's what
Harder weight
Henry
is a lot,
Payne
yes.
from the Detroit News kept saying, because he does a lot of racing, does a lot of vintage racing. And he said, well, McElroy, y'all got, because I'm a lot lighter than most of those guys. I said, yeah, don't I get a handicap for my age? I'm older, way older than you guys. So
Need some ballast in there.
it was a hoot.
Sure.
So yeah, thanks for bringing it up, Gary.
So big racing weekend, Indianapolis.
But Scott, you were down at Indy too.
first time ever. And man, what a hoot. It's just a lot of fun. And, you know, I went down there with Chevy, so you kind of get a premier look at everything because I mean you can go into an air-conditioned suite during the race, and
Well, wait a minute. Were you in the pagoda?
no.
I was in the pagoda.
I thought the most fascinating thing was walking along pit road during the race, and you would see the kind of the flag go up for them to a car coming in, and you might hear it on the scanner.
Yeah.
And then you go over to where the car's getting changed, and you have to get there early because in 8 seconds or less,
They're out.
car's already gone. And
Well, so you had a hot pit pass.
yeah.
Yeah.
Ooh, I did not have that.
I did last year. Did you see David Letterman in the pits?
No, we didn't see David Letterman, but
My wife and I went last year, and we
He was there this
Spied
year.
on
I didn't
David
see him,
Letterman.
but I know others who
Yeah.
the
did.
thing that was amazing was you change tires every 33 laps. When those tires come off, they're just shredded. I mean, chunks of the tire are missing on some of them.
They're so hot too. You
Yeah.
need gloves to burn your hands up.
And just the whole weekend was just really fun. I mean, the Indianapolis is such a beautiful downtown, and we went to the parade. I was not used to standing up every
I
time.
saw your tweets.
Every time an American flag stood up, came by, you had to stand up. And if it was a blow-up model of an American flag, you had to stand up. If it were people dressed as an American flag, as one float, you had to stand up. So
It sounds like a drinking game. So.
it was very close to that. But
Well, how'd you like the race?
the race was fantastic. We were on the infield right at turn one, at the end of the straightaway. So we got a really good look at the very first turn where the accident happened at the beginning of the race.
The only
South
downfall
Bill,
of the whole race was that first turn. That sort of slowed everything down. After that, it was awesome.
The last 50 laps were just incredible. It was always somebody else, and it was always on the back straightaway. Somebody else would take the lead. Somebody else would take the lead, and we were really pulling for Kanaan. And the whole
Everybody
race,
likes Kanaan, yeah.
the whole race, he was complaining on the radio that he had too much understeer. And then they must have fixed it because he oversteered right into the wall. Like nobody was near him. He just came out of turn 4.
Full tires, though.
And it could have been
full tires, yeah.
And
How about you, John? What did you think?
Well, I've been. This is probably my 5th time to the race. But listen, I've been paying attention to this race before they even had it on television. I used to sit down on Memorial Weekend, listen to it on the radio.
And then maybe watch a taped version on ABC Wide World of Sports 2 weeks later.
That's right.
And then when they got the same day coverage, they played in the evening. That was a big step forward in the late 70s. Yeah, I remember that well. Did either of you get a sense of when Montoya was starting to get into the top 5?
I got to brag here because at about lap 102 out of 200, I turned to my wife and I said, "Man, does Montoya look strong."
Yeah.
And I said it about 20 laps later, and 20 laps after that, I said, "Just watch Montoya. He's really moving."
Yeah.
But when it came down to the last 15 laps or so, man, it was a total crapshoot. And what I loved, and that's what's so awesome about Indy, I mean, there's so many people there, several 100,000, that Willpower would go into the lead, big roar from the crowd. And then Montoya would go in, bigger roar from the crowd. And then Scott Dixon would go into a massive roar. So they each had, their own, massive amounts of fans that were there. But what was so amazing is it's a noisy place, and you could, the crowd would drown out the engine noise. It was amazing.
It's still a race. It's still an event worthy of its tagline being the greatest spectacle in racing. And I hate to say it, I think we've said this before, previous years, that you just want to see the series do better and maybe get a few more engine manufacturers in the mix and have more people pay more attention to the rest of the IndyCar races.
Yeah, I agree, Todd, because, as a motor racing fan, and I watch F1, although the Monaco Grand Prix was largely a boring thing.
And they always are. The race is the qualifying, usually.
It really is.
Except for the mistake that...
IndyCar, this year especially, the racing's been fantastic.
Yeah.
Not just for the lead, but there's multiple races down in the pack. And, because of so many more pit stops, there's actually more strategy, literally on the fly kind of strategy. Oh, this happened. Well, we're going to change our strategy and do this now.
Yeah.
And so, to me, it's far more entertaining than F1 is right now.
Oh, come on. There was that big strategy move of Lewis Hamilton getting his tires changed toward the end of the race. I mean, come on. What's better strategy than that?
Yeah. I have to say, I mean, I like F1. I like catching both the Monaco Grand Prix because it's Monaco. It certainly is a procession. And,
it's pretty.
Since we no longer have Ayrton Senna to mix things up on that circuit, it's just watching it because it's Monaco. But, the rest of the season, there are some good races and there's a lot more passing than there was 5 or 10 years ago. But the Indy 500, you have to watch that as well on Memorial Day Sunday, and it's fantastic. And we've got another race coming up this weekend.
This weekend,
Now.
two races. Saturday and Sunday for
right.
IndyCar on Belle Isle in Detroit.
That's right.
And man, Honda's got to do something. They are getting spanked by Chevy.
Even Kimball, who was, drove a Honda engine, I think came in 5th. He was saying at the Indy race, he's just like, Chevy engines were just blowing past us, and they took first 4 spots.
First 4 spots. I think there
No,
was
Kimball was in a Chevy.
He was in a Chevy.
Yeah, he came in.
Graham Rahal.
He was number 5,
Right.
and then Marco was number 6.
But I think they were the only 2 Hondas in the top 10.
In the top 10.
I believe you're right.
Because Rahal said that. They were interviewing afterwards, and he goes, you got to do race as best you can, but he's like, boy, those Chevys were just blowing by us every time, and they were just so much power.
Is that engine or is that the aero package?
I don't know. The engines I would think would be rated as equally as possible.
Yeah.
Well, there are differences, and that's why Chevy and Honda are in it. But I was reading someplace, maybe Racer Magazine, that one of the complaints against the Honda Aero package is there's just too many variations. You can add this bit or that bit and change this or change that. And supposedly the Chevy package is simpler. So since you have a lot less to work with, you can actually reach your optimum setup easier.
And it sounds like none of the teams are getting it right with the Honda Aero package, at least not so far.
If you have infinite fudge factor, you're going to fudge with it infinitely, and so you're never going to.
Yeah, but, they all have simulation packages, right? They all use software. The drivers actually get to drive on the simulator. Now, I'm talking of the big rich teams. The smaller teams do not.
But you'd figure that Bobby Rahal and Michael Andretti probably know a little bit something about setting up cars, and if they could do no better than 5th and 6th, between those two guys, I mean, obviously they're competing with one another, but
and that's the highest they got. I mean, the Hondas were, most of the day they were not even in the top 8.
Mm-hmm.
Hey, I know there's separate budgets, and this really probably doesn't matter, but it was also the first weekend where McLaren Honda finally got into the points with Jenson Button finishing 8th at Monaco, and you kind of wonder, is there enough budget for both of those programs to move forth in the current season?
I'm willing to bet they've got this giant vault of money that's for F1 somewhere in Honda, and then they've got some money over there for IndyCar racing. I think
it's quite a different. It's quite.
But it was
a lot more money.
one of the Monaco race. I mean, which it was with Nico Rosberg winning 3 Monacos in a row, and that puts him ties with Graham Hill, Alain Prost, and Senna. That they were
Senna had 6.
Senna had
3 in a row.
3 in a row, and then because Sterling Moss and Jackie Stewart won 3 Monacos, but not in a row, and then Schumacher and Graham Hill won 5 Monacos, and Prost won 4 Monacos. But this 3 in a row was pretty significant, and I mean, can you imagine how happy he felt when Hamilton went in the pits for tires and knew that he was going to be taking the lead?
I had read afterward that I'm not sure he exactly knew that until
it happened?
Until he finished, basically, until he took the.
No, because remember they had the pace car, and he said he was stunned to find out.
That's right.
He's the one behind the pace car, going, "Where the hell is Hamilton?"
That's when he found out. Yeah,
right.
Exactly.
But it wasn't until then that he was aware of it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I have to say he was unusually gracious afterward in his comments regarding Hamilton's team's mistake, which we hadn't heard before.
When I won my go-kart race, I was very magnanimous, too.
Good.
That's how true champions are. That's just on victory.
Yeah.
Well, then there was a Coca-Cola 600, and I think it was significant because Toyota got another win. Carl Edwards won that race. And I was looking, and I mean, I thought there was this huge... So Montoya won $2.5 million for winning the Indianapolis 500. Guess how much Carl Edwards got for driving 100 miles more?
$1 million.
Half that, yeah.
$363,000. So, I mean, it's like, what? I mean, so I thought, okay, maybe that's not, maybe...
I bet he makes up for it in sponsorship money.
Maybe the Coca-Cola 600 isn't what Indy is to that. And so I thought, the Daytona 500 must be. But Joey Logano won that, and he got basically $1.6 million. So it's just like,
Meanwhile, by the way, the same weekend, Lewis Hamilton signed a 3-year contract worth 150 million euro, I believe, with
that's 180 mil
Mercedes.
For Mercedes, yeah. Yeah, I don't think, when I heard that when he lost the race, it's like, because, I mean, so maybe you guys know, because, I mean, I was desperately trying to figure this out. I mean, do Formula One drivers just get a salary and don't?
They never talk about a.
I mean, I Googled every possible which way I could, and it's just like
a closely held secret. Always has been. They never even announce what the prize money at any race is. So it's all what you can negotiate. So here's an interesting little story aside. I went to the Indy 500 as a guest of Firestone. And on, what would that be, Saturday morning, we had Mario Andretti for breakfast. And we got to ask Mario different kinds of things. And I was asking him about his Formula One days. And he said, yeah, he started racing for Lotus in 1977. And then, but it was just a 1-year contract. He said, but I had a handshake agreement with Colin Chapman that I would sign with him the next year. He says, Ferrari calls, and it's Enzo Ferrari calls, not his right-hand guy, right? So Mario tells Chapman, hey, I got a call from Enzo, and I'm going to go down and visit him. And Chapman said, don't do it at all. Please don't do it. And he said, look, man, I got to do it. You know, I'm not just in this for anything. I got a family and blah, 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 blah. So anyway, he goes down there. And so Enzo says, so what would it take for you to drive for me? He says, look, I got a handshake with Colin. I just came down here because I owe it to myself. And he says, well, throw me a number. So he says, I did a quick calculation. And he says, you got to remember what the money was like back then. But he said, I asked for $5,000 more per race than I was getting with Lotus. And he said, didn't blink an eye at all. So he said, yeah, we'll do it. And so he flies back to England, says to Colin, hey, look, you know, Ferrari's willing to pay me a lot more money than what you're paying me. And Colin says, well, what did they offer you? And Mario says, I did a quick calculation. And he says, and I doubled the price. And he said, Colin and I shook hands on it. I raced in '78 and won the championship for Lotus.
Wow. Isn't that interesting?
So Mario must be a pretty good negotiator.
Mm-hmm. But,
oh, that's the music coming up. So
I was just going to say, you know, how Mercedes continues to be dominant in Formula One, but Ferrari is now gaining some ground there. It's quite surprising.
Yeah.
And Red Bull?
The second team ahead of, they're doing better than Williams Mercedes, for example.
Right.
Hey, we're going to take a quick break here. We got to give a shout out to our friends at Bridgestone, and we'll be back in just a few seconds, actually.
He has binders.
Oh.
We're back.
So, you know, every year there's this outfit called Brand Z, does an analysis of the valuation of worldwide brands, and basically the idea behind this is that if you have a really good brand, your company's more valuable because your consumers will be more interested in what you have to sell. So if you have not such a good brand, you're not going to sell as well. So it makes a lot of sense. So they came out this week with their numbers and the 100 most valuable brands for 2015. And so it surprised none of us here to learn that the most valuable brand in the world is, of course, Apple. Okay, I mean, Apple just dwarfs everybody by an amazing amount. And then Google is number 2, no surprise there. Microsoft's number 3. But where is the first car company on this list of 100 leading brands? I mean, we all think that car companies would be pretty high up on the charts, I think. And
I've got a feeling it's not 4th place.
It's not 4th place.
And
30th.
I bet
you
the top
30th.
10. 30th?
30th. He is right.
Look it up. Okay.
And who is it?
Winner.
Tesla.
No.
I know
Most
what it is.
valuable brand.
Ford.
It's Toyota.
Toyota. Oh, no, that makes sense.
Yeah, so Toyota. So I mean, so just think about this for a minute. So you've got Apple, Google, Microsoft, and then you go way down, and then you get to Toyota. Okay, so 34th is BMW. Mercedes is at 43rd.
Jeez.
Honda is at 78th. Ford at 80th. And the last car company on the list is Nissan at 93rd. And if you look at the numbers that we have there, that basically, look at the difference between Nissan's brand valuation and Apple's brand valuation.
Yeah, or Toyota's even.
I mean,
versus
but
Apple.
just look at the multiplier there, and it's sort of funny that John Krafchick used to say when he was at Hyundai that he would go up and talk to the guys at Apple, and he said it was always astonishing to him that you could put all of the products that Apple makes on the top of a desk. Right? Okay. And
they don't even make it.
Until it builds its own car, right? Which, today you had, what's his name, the current CEO of
Tim
Apple.
Cook?
Tim Cook saying something about how the automobile is the ultimate mobile device. Well, kind of a well-duh statement, but everybody's kind of picking up on it as Apple's acknowledgement that maybe they're working on a car of some sort, and some of that might be in reaction to what Google's been doing with autonomy in the last 7 or 8 or 10 years.
Also, the Apple Play is going to become a big deal.
It's going to go in everything, along with Android.
Android
Apple.
Auto,
Android
Auto, and then CarPlay.
Yeah, Apple
That's
Car.
the Apple.
Well, here's another question. So Apple has long been considered an aspirational brand, and correct me if I'm wrong, Gary, but hasn't BMW been ahead of Toyota in some years?
Toyota's basically been.
It's always been ahead of BMW. And so maybe I'm thinking of another list that someone else does, and here's where we can start to call into question the whole idea of doing these things anyway. But it's a little bit of a surprise to me that when you talk about the value of a brand, that people would talk about cars that they can afford to buy, brands they can afford to buy, like Toyota and Honda and Nissan and Ford, rather than BMW and Mercedes. I would think in some way those might be higher, that maybe in the old days Lexus might have placed higher than Toyota. Does that entail Toyota as a corporation, or just the Toyota brand?
This is our methodology. It says it's the only study to combine measures of brand equity based on interviews with over 3 million consumers globally about thousands of global consumer-facing and business-to-business brands with a rigorous analysis of the financial and business performance of each company using data from Bloomberg and Kantar Retail to separate the value the brand plays in driving the business and shareholder value. So basically, you're looking at the whole thing, and one would have to say, well, wait a minute, look at all the fixed costs that are associated with things like building cars versus outsourcing to someone else, or
the age-old problem, right?
Yeah. So, but and I
Why Wall
think
Street loves Apple and not the car companies.
Yeah, and I think, and the other thing you have to think about is that while BMW is certainly more aspirational than Toyota, I mean, somebody's going to want a 3 Series more than they want a Camry. You've also got to believe that the numbers of people that would be in support of Toyota because they realize that this is something in their sphere of possibility is far greater than the number for BMW or Mercedes.
Well, I also think it creates opportunity for things like using the stronger brand in a vehicle. You've seen more and more of that. I mean, I think the F-150 was one of the best examples where they had a bed lock, and it was branded and made by Masterlock. They had, remember the crew chief thing, the RFID stuff, and it was worked with DeWalt. And why not use the brands that are best at doing stuff for your vehicles? And the CarPlay is just one really big example. It doesn't mean that Apple endorses the Chevy Cruze or something, but it does mean that you have an Apple product in your car. And Apple people and that's why it's the #1 brand. That's why Apple people are crazy about Apple stuff.
Sure. What I thought was interesting is John, you were talking a couple, 3 weeks ago about the whole issue of Cadillac and Cadillac needing better marketing in order to, get some traction in the luxury field. And you think about it, I mean, that is sort of what we're seeing with this. I mean, because you notice, General Motors is not on the list, nor do we have Chevrolet or Opel or any of these other things? And so I just wonder if it gets back to what you were talking about.
Well, actually, Chevy announced that they're going to have both CarPlay and Android Auto in 14 other models before the year is out. So they may actually be in front of everybody in incorporating both systems. And, I think you're right. The branding issue is there. But the big thing is that in-car entertainment systems, including nav, are getting so complicated right now. And, we notice it because we're jumping from car to car to car. But even for the average consumer to get in and go, which menu do I get to and how do I get to it? And I'm driving down the road and I don't want to be distracted. I don't know how many people have asked me, why can't the screen of my car look just like my smartphone? Why can't I have the same apps and just go and do that? And that's really what we're getting at here. Is you being able to jump in with your Droid device or your iPhone and kabam, you have familiar looking apps and you can swipe and pinch and use it the way that you've been using your iPad or phone.
So how much of that is the car companies basically wanting to have that property themselves?
Well, the Chevrolet, I attended a preliminary of an embargoed event where they described all this, and I asked, well, what about, so does this work whether you have a nav system in your car or not? It does, just as long as you've got a trim level that has at least a 7-inch screen rather than the base Sonics or whatever that have just a little screen, the little out display like that. And so you might have a car with nav and use your Google map or your Apple map, or you might not have a nav, and then you would still use your Google and Apple map, obviously. And you would think that this could potentially put built-in navs out of business. There'd be no reason to do that. Why not have, just seamlessly get into the car and you've already got your route mapped out. But of course, and we've talked a lot about autonomy. The maps are the built-in navigation systems are very important to the kind of autonomous systems that, for example, Google's been testing. They have to have the nav in the car. So I agree. I mean, it just seems it'd be so much easier just to use your phone for everything. And not deal with what's in the car. Although I still want 2 real hard round knobs for volume and radio stations.
Yeah, tuning.
I look at it more as that what I want is a screen that provides a docking station for my phone. Just like I can plug my laptop and have a big computer screen on my desk, why can't I just plug my phone in? I can get out of the car later, it'll be fully charged. Everything that's on there. I mean, for navigation, I use Waze. I'm going to use Waze always over any car navigation system because no car navigation system tells me where cops are.
Right.
So what I want is a system that just projects my phone. To me, I know that there's other.
You need this Waze, obviously.
Oh, Waze is, yes.
Yeah.
Everyone needs Waze.
You know who owns Waze?
Google.
Yeah, I did know that. And they could, reincorporate all that stuff. The other problem you run into when you get those very overly complex systems, many of them now, I hate when I have to download an app to use Toyota's stuff to connect my phone. And I don't even know how much data I'm giving back to them.
Right.
The only app that I don't mind using really is the GM app, the OnStar app, but that's because that gives me other controls as well. I mean, they're now more and more doing that where you can unlock your car with your phone and you can start your car with your phone and you can do all of those little things. But I just find some of them really cumbersome and I don't want to pay any kind of subscription fee.
Right. I totally agree.
How is XM and Sirius surviving though too? With if you can bring your phone into the car, and you've already got even before Android Auto and Apple CarPlay, the ability to use Stitcher and all those other Pandora and all the other music services. So what's the future of XM Sirius? Is it like the built-in nav system? Will it be around or not? I don't know.
Realize
this is a great discussion.
Remember, it used to be XM and Sirius. There were 2 separate companies, and now it's Sirius XM, one company. So that's one clue.
Yeah.
Now
and
another
several years already.
And then another clue is the fact that as we're sitting here right now, that Sirius XM has this deal that is basically announcing that if you have a deactive phone or radio at home, turn it on. It now works.
Yeah.
So they're basically trying to get people to listen to them.
Well, you remember when...
So is XM Sirius on borrowed time?
I think it is.
Before they go
I
away?
suspect they probably are. But then again, I got to wonder how many of those other services are not going to survive as well.
Yeah.
Because I was going to say, remember when they said that not wearing your seatbelt would never be a primary offense to pull you over? Kind of like Sirius XM when they said we'll never have commercials either.
Yeah,
and because I find it less and less useful. Sirius. The only time I really like it is if you're in the middle. I drove out to Minnesota and there's a couple of spots in Wisconsin. No offense, but there wasn't a whole lot there.
I've been there, yes, but
XM
from
Sirius.
the southeast part of the state.
Satellite radio is great then because you can.
But as more and more cars are getting 4G LTE, you're likely to have a whole lot more bandwidth and not have dead spots where you can't stream whatever music you want. I think Sirius XM in the future is just going to have to become another online streaming service, not a paid-for.
GM's 4G LTE is fantastic.
Right, but there's one thing that to your point, and I think this is something that people lose sight of, is the fact that that the telecom companies are going to begin throttling data, and as you're beginning to use more and more of your data plan for things like navigation or things like listening to music and so on, and then, oh, by the way, you may want to make a phone call every now and then, you're going to find yourself perhaps having a bill that would make you wish you were still paying for Sirius XM.
Well, and speaking of that, I mean, and even paying for Sirius XM, there was another study, and of course there's all these studies that almost contradict each other after a while. Just a few weeks ago about how the majority of drivers want AM, FM, old-fashioned terrestrial radio, and that's generally what I use driving to and from work. Who wants to fiddle with, setting up whatever it is? So, maybe that's still the cheapest solution. It's certainly the cheapest solution. How much of this do we really want in the car? We've already got too many people spending time on the phone and texting. The advantage of Apple CarPlay and Android Auto is that you use the voice recognition system. So in the case of Apple CarPlay, you use Siri. You can actually, in the new Chevy system, send texts and receive texts that are read out to you rather than type them in. So I suppose that might be a safety item, but
A lot of depends on the messages.
It depends on the message.
And who's riding with you.
Okay, enough said.
But one thing that sort of goes to the point of simplicity and navigation and gets to the branding thing, I see you're driving the Honda Pilot out there,
right,
and Honda switched to Garmin for that navigation system in that vehicle. So it's the classic Garmin screen that we're all used to from the things that we all bought that we stuck on our windshields, and which sort of makes a lot of sense to me, because you have like a high level of familiarity for most people, and you don't have to go in there and figure out this new one, right?
But I got to tell you, I drove down to Indy in that Pilot, and I love the vehicle. It's really impressive, but I hate the infotainment system. The nav system, the voice recognition is not very good. And the screen, you can pinch and swipe and all that. So if you want to make the map bigger, you can explode it or shrink it down. But when you explode the map, all of a sudden, it's so narrow to what's around you, you lose any detail of where you're going. And when you try to zoom out to get that idea of where am I and where am I headed, you lose all kind of detail on the map. I ended up using my phone. My phone, actually, the voice recognition was way better, and we ended up navigating with the phone, not the navigation system in the car.
Well, and the fact that they've branded the nav system, the new Honda Pilot Garmin nav system, I wonder, well, does that mean that Garmin just said, here's your nav system? Or did Honda work with it the way it would with its own built-in nav system?
I'm sure they
prior
worked
to
with
them?
them.
Well, yeah, but to the same extent. The point being is that maybe Honda is seeing that a few years down the road, you won't buy a nav system from them. You'll just use Apple CarPlay or
well, that's their big fear, right? Because most nav systems right now, you get the nav and the screen.
Yeah.
It's a package. It's typically a $2,000 option. I mean, these guys do not want to lose that at all, but they're going to lose it.
And that's good money. They make money on those.
Oh yeah. That's mostly profit at that price. $2,000 when you can get a
$50 screen.
That's a $50 screen and a 25-cent software package.
Right.
I mean, but
You think
the question is,
screen costs all $50?
No.
but the screens are always going to be put in. I mean, nobody wants to not have a screen, right? And
No, I want what Scott said.
No, but
I want to be able to mount my phone right on the
But
dash.
you want it projected, right? You want it bigger than.
Even if it's just my phone. What I do now is I finally went out and bought one of those stupid sticker things with the suction cup, and I mount my phone right below my rear view mirror. And I kind of wish there would just be a USB port on the top of my dash so I could plug stuff in.
Like that?
I would love it if I could mount my phone that way, but I understand that all the different phones and things like that. But
so what? They should sell you an adapter at the dealer.
Yep, yeah, there should be
No,
connectors that you can do.
my favorite nav systems tend to be the ones where they also display the directions right there on the IP on the dash as part of one of the instruments. You get turn right.
So in the middle of the cluster when you're looking straight ahead.
One of the things to John's point earlier, and I've really noticed this with nav systems. We're the last generation to read maps. Nobody's going to read a fold-out map anymore, and it's really a shame.
The triptych. I had one coming over here today.
It's really a shame because the thing with map reading has always been that you get a context of where everything is connected. And when you drive with nav systems, you don't have that same connection when you get to downtown Indianapolis. You just know you turn right here, you took this road, you don't even know really which direction you came in from.
It's true. No, you're totally right.
And, so go learn and read paper maps. You should always do that.
And read books too, and maybe buy some
And
vinyl
buy some
records.
magazines.
Stay in school.
Exactly, buy some magazines.
Buy at least 2 magazines.
Yeah. Even if you don't read them.
Subscribe. It's cheap.
But you know, two things going on. Number one, the car companies don't want to give up this $2,000 option, and they know they're going to lose it. The other thing, because people have asked me, why did the auto industry take so long to get Google and Apple in the car? And it's actually the other way around, because you have never had any of the computers that control any part of your car crash. I mean, you may have had the infotainment system crash, but the ABS brakes, the engine controller, the body computer, the transmission, that stuff doesn't crash because it's written to what they call automotive grade software, which is tested up and down and upside. And the electronics industry doesn't do that. They write it, they put it out, and here's a bug, here's a patch. There's another bug, here's another patch. That never happens. It's actually taken Apple and Google this long to come up to automotive standards.
You're going to see more of that. Ford's new cars are talking about how they'll start doing Wi-Fi updates when you park it at home, and there'll be these patches that are going through on stuff. And the more gizmos and gadgets that they put into cars, they're going to try to find more ways to use and maximize the use of those things. You put the 4G LTE connection in a car, what else can we do with that? You put something else, whether it be some kind of GPS tracker or a cell phone chip, basically, in every car. How else can we use that? And, one of my big complaints about all those apps that you put on your phone to operate stuff, how much data are you then giving back to car makers that they can use? How much information does Tesla collect from all of its owners?
Okay, yeah, we're going to, look.
That's why neither Scott nor I use Google, right?
Yeah, we're we're dog patch
except,
kind of.
Except he's driving with Waze, and so Waze knows exactly where he is, how fast he's going.
I like that it says about at least 40 miles an hour.
Okay, another break. Coming back in a minute. Less.
I have to get a big...
Long live the pioneers, rebels and mutineers. Go forth and have no fear. Come close and lend an ear. And I say, hey, live it like we're renegades.
Okay, we're back, and as all you loyal viewers know, last week we had Richard Rawlins, the guy with the TV show called Fast and Loud, and he's written a book called Fast and Loud, Blood, Sweat, and Beers, and we had a contest to see who could win one of 3 different autographed copies of this book, and we're going to announce who our 3 lucky winners are. And I've asked each of these guys to announce the winners. And Todd, why don't I start with you? Who's yours?
Robert Gallion from Dearborn, Michigan.
Oh, my God, a local guy. Okay, Scotty?
Kevin Hoshaw from Kansas City, Missouri.
All right. Gary?
We're going right across the country here. Guillermo Gonzalez from L.A.
Awesome.
Guillermo.
So congratulations, guys. You're going to get copies of this book soon enough. I don't know when, but we'll put them in the mail and you'll be getting them. So what else? Oh, we were talking about, who owns the software? Who gets the data? Did you guys see this court case that's going on? GM and John Deere are saying, hey, you can't go in and change the software in our cars. When you buy the car, you don't get the software. They're playing this Microsoft game that you only get to lease the software.
That story ripped all the way around the world very quickly when I think Autoblog first reported it on copyright infringement. And
what do you guys make of this? This sounds so bogus to me. Where did they pull this out of? I mean, they've allowed people to hack into their system to boost it for more performance. Since they put computers in cars, why are they suddenly saying, oh, you don't own it, you're only leasing?
Chip in your car voids warranty. That's all they need to worry about. It's no longer covered in warranty. If you want to chip your
But they're
3
going
Series.
beyond that. They're not just voiding your.
But
your
that's
warranty.
probably as far as they're going to get in the court of law. I would
Yeah.
think if they try to drag someone in, it's gosh, it's a tough thing. I mean, you remember. It smacks a little bit of decades ago when kids were getting music for free. Obviously, that's a much different thing. You're paying for the car. You assume you're paying for everything that goes into the car, including the software, and that once it's your car, it's your car. You can do with it whatever you want. You can turn it into a hot rod if you want. You can chip it, as Scott points out. Boy,
See, my
this is
conspiracy mind says this is not about shade tree mechanics or people coming up with performance chips. This is looking down the road to what we were talking about before, as Google and Apple become even bigger players, and who owns the data, who collects a revenue to that data. I think this is them thinking ahead to, like, ooh, what happens when we get connected cars and ultimately autonomous cars? And are we going to let Silicon Valley take all this revenue? Hell no. We own that software, and don't you dare touch it.
Well,
That's what I think is going
to your
on.
point, if I have say a semi-automated car, a Cadillac Super Cruise a few years down the road, not that I could afford that, but let's say I had one, and if I could get a hacker to go into it and say, okay, I want it to work to be semi-automated when I'm on I-80, I-95, I-94.
Yeah, don't go 70 miles an hour.
But
Go 85.
well, not only that, but I want that to work, but I don't want it to send the information to General Motors, to whoever has the, whether it's Google or Apple or Microsoft. I don't want any of that information going back saying, I drove from point A to point B and I stopped at this restaurant and that store. I don't want to be bombarded with advertising I don't want to be sold to. Is that possible? I don't know. We maybe should hear from some hackers. Maybe they could tell us whether that might be possible down the road.
Yeah, okay,
do
so all
that,
you hackers out there,
Black
we want to hear from you.
helicopters come and take your car away. But the complete flip side of this whole thing, though, is Ford making the announcement that they're opening up their patents for electric vehicles to everyone for a fee. I liked how they slipped that in there. And last year, Tesla said,
Have at it, for free.
For free. But there was always the speculation, so we have this guy that I mentioned earlier, Anton Waldman, who is a big Tesla guy, and so I sent him
Big Tesla critic.
Yes, and I said, Anton, are they free? Yes, but, and a big long thing. But so here we have the car industry basically saying, okay, we want to make people have the opportunity to develop on what we have developed, at least in terms of EVs. What do you guys make of that? Do you think this is a desperate cry for?
Well, to quote one of my friends, Tesla is a very good battery manufacturer that also produces niche cars.
They're building this big new super gigafactory.
And you need people to be using their materials in order so then you can use their batteries.
Mm-hmm. And it also lowers the price for them. I mean,
Right.
the whole problem right now is the cost of the battery technology and the infrastructure, getting a bigger infrastructure. So if you spread this out among other automakers and get them to use the same sort of thing, you make your car more popular, you can bring the price down, the cost down, and thus the price, and sell more of them.
And it's hive engineering, I mean, you're using the hive mind to try to solve problems that right now no one's sure really how to do it. So much of that stuff was done, in engineering labs and in mechanic shops that nobody really understood the process. And now that I have no problem at all with people opening it up and trying to create something that's better.
Mm-hmm. Can Anton's conspiracy theory, if you will, can that be boiled down to a soundbite? Can you give us an idea of what he thinks is going on here?
With
your critic, Tesla critic.
he has a multitude of.
Oh, yeah. It all starts out with he has shorted Tesla stock. So he wants the stock price to go down, and he is a mega critic. But he's very upfront and open about that. I mean, he at the end of every article he writes, "Hey, full disclosure, I'm short Tesla."
But in terms of the patent thing, it just all comes down to that when Elon opened them up, he said you can use them, and then there was the phrase "in good faith," which caused the people on Wall Street to go crazy. Because what does it mean, in good faith? Does this mean that if Elon decides that you have nefarious plans, that he'll sue your ass, or
that sounds like Elon Musk just loving to see Wall Street go crazy, because they do anytime he.
Guy burps and their stock goes up 10%.
But then Toyota opened up its fuel cell patents earlier this year as well. So
listen.
So we're seeing
last week we were talking about Sergio Marchionne, who's saying what? Hey, we all got to merge. We're all doing this duplicative R&D, and it's driving up costs. We can't return the cost of capital. Blah 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 blah. And this week, what's Ford saying? Hey, you can have all our electric car patents. All you have to do is license it.
Well, and
to me, that's almost Ford in a way of saying, Sergio, you want to save a ton of money on R&D? Just pay us a little licensing fee, and now you can get into the electric car business. And, Ford makes a lot of money licensing its technology, not just in the auto industry, by the way, either. We had a guy, Bill Coughlin, in here a couple of years ago who manages all of Ford's intellectual property. He would not say how much money the company makes, but he made it sound like it's a lot of money.
Well, if you have charcoal or you have, all kinds of stuff.
Kingsford charcoal.
Well, and I mean, there's tons of companies. TRW, if you just own their patents, you could live very well off of their patents and all the licensing that, electronic stability control gets you. And so many, there's lots of companies like that.
Yeah, and there's also, sure, you can say, okay, Sergio, Fiat Chrysler can have our patents for this amount of money, but you might also save a little bit more money if you actually buy the components from us. If you buy some of the components, if it comes down to that. So
well,
then he'd say, you could save more money if you just bought my company, and then you can.
Right.
Ford doesn't want that.
What's going to happen with that? Do you guys think that?
With what? With Sergio?
Yeah, is somebody going to buy FCA?
I just finished a column on it that should be running at automobilemag.com soon. I think he's onto something in that. The whole problem is that if you look at car sales in mature markets, it hasn't moved much in 40 years. I mean, you had a low of a little bit more than 10 million after the 2009 bankruptcies, and that was a number we reached in 1965. You had a high. You have a high of about 16.8 from last year, and the record is still 17.8 from 15 years ago. I think there's probably not room for all these commodity brands going forward, especially since all the growth is happening in China and India, and China is supplying a number of its own car companies. So I think we're going to see more consolidation by either consolidation or companies going away by just the attrition. Unless we can somehow grow the mature markets in a big way in the next 10 or 15 years. I don't see that happening.
Nobody else is saying this. I mean, nobody else is.
I thought Cerberus was looking into Chrysler. But
Sure they are,
Look,
yeah.
I think, Sergio pulled the pin out of the grenade and threw it into the crowd. And this is going to stir up the activist investors. This is going to stir up the investment bankers. This is going to stir up the venture capitalists.
Didn't
Well, the big
GM just have to deal with that?
They did.
The big head scratcher was the New York Times piece in the business section on Sunday, where they reported that he had sent an email to Mary Barra in March saying, hey, we should combine. And it was kind of like, well, you came in and saved this from happening in 2009. We all know that today, just as in 2009, just a little bit of a difference. In 2009, all that would have been left of Chrysler as we know it was Jeep. And now you'd have Jeep and Ram, and you'd have a General Motors with 3 truck brands basically to go up against Ford. There's no way GM had any interest in doing that. There's just they had to get rid of brands in 2009.
Well, some years ago, and I'm talking about a decade and a half ago, there was talk, and it never got beyond that, of saying, why doesn't GM, Ford, and Chrysler just form a collective powertrain division? And that division isn't owned by any of them, or maybe it's owned by all 3, but it designs all their 4s and 6s and 8s and whatever else they're going to have, powertrain, engine, and transmission, and they all just buy from that, and they'll have mega volume, and that would drive down costs. And it went nowhere.
Yeah,
but I think that's what Sergio's trying to stir up again. But my question is, if he's that worried about all this money he's spending on powertrain, especially, that's what he's talking about, powertrain and platforms, why don't you just go to Mary and say, hey, I'll buy 5 million engines from you. I'll buy 4 different platforms from you. Just sell them to me. I'll buy in bulk, so give me a good price. And now I've just saved billions in R&D costs.
There's a little bit of the problem there. The conundrum is that meanwhile, he's trying to make Alfa Romeo a distinctive automaker again and going with all new rear-wheel drive platforms that he has to design basically from the ground up for Alfa Romeo, just to take advantage of what has really been happening in the business in the last 5 or 6 or 7 years, that the commodity side of the car business has kind of grown back to, this pre-recession level. But the big boom has been in the premium and luxury markets, the premium and luxury brands, and especially premium and luxury sport utility vehicles. You look at something like Volkswagen Group and the announcement that yes, we are going to do a Lamborghini sport utility vehicle. And you think about it, what a great business plan. You have basically one platform for all your big luxury sport utility vehicles, and you sell, $250,000 Bentleys and Lamborghinis and $80,000 Audis off of it, and maybe even a next generation VW Touareg, and make all kinds of money just off that one platform alone.
But the question then is Alfa Romeo. I mean, do you think, Scott, that given how competitive that segment is, whether he's ever going to get sufficient volume in Alfa Romeo to be able to, pay back the tooling costs?
What's sufficient volume?
Isn't he talking like 400,000 units a year?
Yeah, if you look at what's going on with Audi's growth and with Mercedes and BMW and now we've got Cadillac and Lincoln getting more aggressive in there. It's just like I just don't see where that's going to come from. And there was a report that Bloomberg just had that sales in China for the big luxury vehicles, the stretched luxury vehicles, is collapsing. And now they're buying more economical Porsches. It's just
and that's a whole part of the equation.
It's a shame. I just feel
we've seen these ups and downs in China for the last several years, and at some point the central government comes in and issues some incentives and props up the market again. But how long can they do that?
I don't think China is going to be on that continuous line.
No, it's not.
I think that we're at the tail end of where China sales are, and that if anybody wants any significant growth, they're either going to have to steal somebody else's market share, which I don't think you can do if you're using everybody else's platforms and engines, or kind of rework their formulas. So often you see these projections that just go on forever. Unfortunately for Ford, seems to be the one late to the China party, and they're one where you're like, I don't see the growth in China 5 years from now.
And will the relative newcomers get cut off more so than the Buicks and the Audis that have been there for a long time? Right. No, India is the next big
disaster. You think about it.
Yes,
the brick nations. Remember, 10 years ago, everybody was all about brick.
Right.
Mm-hmm. Brazil is not anything great.
No.
Russia is you're just throwing money away. India doesn't have the infrastructure to support cars in any fashion other than Tatas. And China...
They're not selling those either.
And it's just really small, not very profitable vehicles are what you can sell in India. And if you lose money on a vehicle, you can't make it up in volume. And China is another one where it's been a really good run and people have done really well. But you have two things that can happen. One, the Chinese partner may become the full partner and you're not the partner.
Yes.
And the sales have reached a point where I think we're at a saturation level that may not grow that much more.
Hey, let's change topics somewhat, because we did get a couple of questions come in from viewers. In fact, one of them's calling in, and Ben, why don't we bring in that phoner now?
This is Clem Zarobsky at Delmont, Pennsylvania. Since you guys are talking about racing, I wanted to make a point about NASCAR. Everybody's all excited because the Toyotas won 2 races in a row here where they haven't done much for the last year. I believe NASCAR lowered the horsepower ratings and the RPM ratings of their engines so Toyota could compete. Because before, when they tried to compete with the Fords and the Chevys, the Toyotas all had engine problems. They lowered the horsepower so they would last, and then they couldn't run with the Chevys and the Fords. So that's just my personal opinion. Talk to you later. Bye.
Yeah, thanks for that. Thanks for that.
Wasn't a sludge issue? Didn't try to have a.
Did they do
It
that?
certainly wasn't unintended acceleration, was it?
No.
Did they lower the horsepower ratings in NASCAR, or what they could do? I wasn't aware.
I don't know how the ratings
A little
go.
bit out of my wheelhouse.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But the only thing I'd point out, too, is, Toyota hadn't done it very well, but except for the Penske team, Ford sucks in NASCAR right now. Boy, if it wasn't for Penske with Keselowski and Logano, Ford would be nowhere in NASCAR. And it's all Richard Childress and Rick Hendrick's teams that are cleaning up there.
Right.
Makes me wonder, too, about Toyota in NASCAR. They've been in NASCAR for 12 years or something like that already, something like that, and longer if you count trucks, I think. Stereotypically, at least, the NASCAR crowd is not a foreign brand crowd. Has Toyota's participation and this year's relative success done anything to change that?
Ooh, good question.
That's a great question. I couldn't come close to giving you an answer on that.
And in all fairness to F1 racing, Chevy did great, is doing very well right now, but if Honda wasn't there, we wouldn't have IndyCar racing.
Yeah. We knew what you meant.
It wouldn't be there. Honda propped up IndyCar racing for
sure.
Right.
For sure.
See, and I think this goes back to what you were saying earlier, though, that, you want more participants in these series.
Yeah.
And so, okay, let's just say for the sake of argument that they actually did lower the horsepower ratings for the engines. And so it's basically a formula, right? Like Formula One has a certain formula, you have to meet the formula. And so if that allows Toyota to be more competitive, and that it should be even for all these guys, and it might make it easier for others to come into the series. And I think that more name brands in any given racing series makes it for a more exciting series, and rather than just having somebody that's just one and dominant. So we have Chevy and Honda in IndyCar now. Wouldn't it be nice if there were other makers that decided Ford comes back or
well, then the question is, what kind of controls, what kind of formula do you put on that? And my impression of NASCAR is that they try to make those cars physically, in terms of their body, their aerodynamics, their engines, as close together as possible. So you're really, in the end, rooting for the driver. In Formula One, yes, you have a formula. You have to say, well, now this year we've got V6 turbos with some sort of ERS, the new version of KERS, and they have to weigh so much and blah, blah, blah. But you still have, because each engine brand and each chassis manufacturer does things differently, you've got these wide variances between, Mercedes dominating this season and last season, and Ferrari now coming back up, and Honda really struggling, having come back in. So, there you've got more engine brands than the other two series, but you also have more variance, I think, which I like. I think that's just the way to go. If we turn back the clock to the days when, you just had an open formula and brought whatever engine you thought worked, whether it was an H16 or an aluminum Buick V8 or a Ford DFV or something. Those days are long gone, unfortunately, but they were fun. And they were great days for IndyCar at the same time, too.
Right.
Yeah, that's when consumer interest was at its highest.
Yeah.
Hey, we got another question here. Right Knight wants to know, should the new Nissan Maxima have been rear drive based with an all-wheel drive option?
Yes.
Yes.
There you go, Right Knight. You got your answer.
Yes and no. Nissan set forth they decided a while back that almost all Nissans would be front-wheel drive. The the Z car and the pickup trucks being the exception, and that Infiniti would be its rear-wheel drive brand, and they're the CUVs at Infiniti being an exception. So that's how they prefer to divide it right now. Would I like to see a rear-wheel drive Maxima? Yeah, that would be nice, but we're never going to see that.
What's the GTR platform? Is that?
Oh, that's rear-wheel drive. Oh, no, it's all-wheel drive.
All-wheel drive, but
That's
I
an
mean,
all-wheel drive
is it
car. That's the rear drive platform. It's basically the same platform as the Infiniti G and the obviously much different size and everything. The Infiniti G and the Z car. It's their FR. Basic FR
I think that if
platform.
you're going to promote a vehicle as a sports sedan, one of the things that you want, and all the competition that you name against, that it goes up against, are all rear-wheel drive cars, you should be too.
But the competition for the Maxima is not rear-wheel drive cars. It's the Chevy Impala, the Ford Taurus,
The only rear driver in the group, I think, is the Chrysler 300.
Well, the ones they like to compare themselves to.
Yeah.
Sorry. The real cup. And, the other thing is it's pricey, the Maxima.
It is.
And so.
But all those, it's actually very competitive with the other cars in the class. It's pricey, but they all are.
Yeah.
And it's a shrinking segment. It's there's no growth there.
It's a shrinking segment where you were, probably getting people moving up from Nissan Altimas and that car's competitor for a long time, and now you have people moving out of Nissan Altimas into Nissan Rogues. No, really, I mean they're basically going from a mid-size sedan to a compact CUV. That's kind of the wave, and people driving compact sedans when they switch to a crossover they're looking at the B segment CUVs that are coming out. Unless they're growing and have a bigger family, then they go.
I've always liked the Maxima too. It's always been a car that's just been a favorite, and I don't want to say much more because I've already driven it, and it's all embargoed until 9 a.m. Eastern Standard Time Wednesday.
I drive it tomorrow afternoon. They're doing
drive it in the
local
morning.
event,
Yeah.
so. Scott, what do you got in your hands? Is there something that you got to announce or say there?
I had tweeted out, seeing if anybody had any important questions. James Crabtree tweeted back and said, long term, I wonder if GM has their brands as they need them. What are Buick and Caddy sales numbers? I'm sure Gary has the numbers. Or hashtags.
Wait, say that again. What long term is?
Long term, I still wonder if GM has their brands as they need them.
You mean have them placed where they need them, or have them?
If they're doing as well as they want.
No, Buick is now starting to drop off.
So Buick,
5%
in the notebook.
In the
I actually
binder?
didn't have it. In the binder I had it. So in terms of retail sales, or let's do total sales rather than retail sales, because I think if you sell one, you sell one. It doesn't matter. But total sales of Buicks, this is through April numbers. Buick, 68,721 units. Year-over-year change is down 4.7%. Cadillac is down. They sold 52,976 cars. So they are down a percent.
GMC's doing well.
See, and Buick.
Chevy's doing but
And Buick just lowered.
GMC's on fire.
Which, that brought up the question.
Because those are the same dealerships as Buick dealerships generally. Mm-hmm. And and Buick just announced that it's lowering the trim and the prices on the Verano and the Regal, I believe, right? Which I think is a mistake. I mean, so basically, it's just a different Chevy. I've always thought they should be placed somewhere in between Chevy and Cadillac. And if they were to go ahead and do something like the Avenir rear-wheel drive sedan as a halo, they might be able to bring that to Buick. They did have some success with that by doing that with the Buick Enclave, even though it's a front-drive based all-wheel drive CUV. The fact that they had basically positioned that above the other GM models that had the same platform, I think brought a lot of the success to the U.S. Buick sales. And in fact, Buick has long crowed about the fact that for years, the Enclave had better sales year after year, even as the thing aged.
Yeah.
So,
although Enclave sales,
well, they're down. Yeah,
but,
down now.
But if you compare that to the Acadia, let's say, okay, which is the same vehicle, the GMC.
Yeah.
Acadia. So for April, April 2015 versus April 2014, Acadia sales up 39.5%.
Wow.
And Enclave sales for the same, so this is comparing April to April, down 4%. And the Chevy Traverse, which is the same, and same period of time, that's up 27.6%.
Yeah, the Buick Enclave until this year was year over year.
I've written before, though, that if you added up the Lambdas, those platforms, and treated them as a single brand, it would be like the 8th largest brand in the country.
Man.
Just those 3 vehicles. But the other thing that I thought was interesting when we were talking about this on Twitter was we started talking about, is there a brand that maybe GM wishes it wouldn't have shed during the bankruptcy? Should it have kept a Pontiac, or should it have,
Bob
Hummer
Lutz thought
or
they should
Saturn?
have kept Pontiac.
Or Saturn?
I don't know. I think they kept the right brands, frankly. And I think Hummer always should have been a sub-brand of GMC. That's the problem. They set up a separate dealership network.
Very
They had to
interesting.
close all those down.
Well, and that was politically, Hummer had to go.
Hummer should have been a GMC what Geo was to Chevrolet, or what LaSalle was to Cadillac, for example.
You got another one there?
Yeah.
I saw an H3T yesterday, by the way. And boy, that looked great. I mean, it's just
The little pickup.
a little pickup.
Okay.
Speedy Sticks asked, why are automakers slow in promoting self-driving highway vehicles?
Because it's not there yet.
I think they're coming along pretty quickly too, and in fact, it's trickling in with Acura
Cadillacs.
having that take your.
But that's still 2 years away, right?
Right.
Cadillac, what do they call it? Super Cruiser.
Right.
And then Mercedes on the S-Class has got an autonomous system, but you got to keep your hands on the steering wheel. Why have a car that can steer itself if you have to keep your hands on the steering wheel?
They're being extremely careful, and to your point about automotive grade software versus Apple or Microsoft software, it has to be very robust. The problem with the Cadillac Super Cruise system is that at this point they can't, you won't be able to operate it that way when there's bad weather, when there's ice or snow on the road, and the system can't read the road very well.
I think that's a technical problem that's going to be solved.
I've
it will be
experimented.
solved. It will be solved, but
in short order.
It's
And
not going to happen right
you
away.
yourself drove that XC90 without your hands on the wheels, correct?
Now that was up to 33 miles an hour. It's it's a traffic jam assist. I can't remember their name for it. But yeah, I mean, hands-free, man. It'll speed up, slow down, it'll turn through turns, but only up to 33 miles an hour. Now it can go all the way, as fast as the car will. But the lawyers have said, no, not yet, please
I've
don't
experimented because a lot of those, the hands-on, it goes by torque feedback.
Right.
Yeah.
And so I've tried to balance like washcloths and things on the top of the steering wheel. And
Doesn't work.
Well, every now and then, if you can get it so that it leans it just a little bit, so it's like your hand is sitting on it, it'll work for a little while. And I've done it over a minute in a Mercedes S-Class. But you're just trying to figure out things that you can put on there.
Just like wrapped a water balloon on either side.
Well, and the funny thing is all of this technology was set in place to make us better drivers, and really it makes people better texters. Because now you can text more because your car's going to stop if you're not looking. It's going to steer around a corner if you're not looking.
Look, checking your blind spots is a lost art, just like parallel parking a car, and that's really going to go away once those cars do it for you.
Okay, we're getting down to the end. Any more there, Scotty?
Somebody, Tweetermeyer asked, does anyone think Tesla battery swap is real?
No.
Anton told us all about that.
Yeah, no, Tweetermeyer is on to, in fact, he wrote something about it. It's a scam. It's a total scam. The lid's going to blow off this thing. It's going to be hugely embarrassing to both Tesla and to the California Air Resources Board. This is a complete scam.
Tell me a little more about that. I'm not.
Okay, so here's how it all works. You have to get ZEV credits.
Yeah.
That's the law. California said you have to have zero emission vehicle credits. And
Right.
there's how many other states, Gary? 8, 10,
16,
12? Some other
11.
states have it too. Okay,
yeah.
so like if you have a hybrid, like a Prius, you get like 1 ZEV credit. If it's a plug-in, you get 3 credits. If it's a Tesla with a 200-mile range, you get 5. And then it keeps going up. And the final couple of credits come in by saying, oh, by the way, if you can refuel the car to have 80% of your range within like 5 minutes. Bang, go, ding, 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 ding. You get 9 credits per car. And now you can sell those credits to other companies that don't have it. And I think the fine is $4,000 a car or $5,000 a car. So, in other words, each credit's worth that $4,000 or $5,000, whatever the number is.
Yeah.
So Tesla, a year and a half ago, did this dog and pony show where they went out and they showed this super swap station where Elon drove a S in, Model S, got out of the car, and they had all these noises and lights going on under the car, and he says, hey, the battery's being swapped out here, and, watch my watch, and yeah, a few minutes later, 5 minutes later, boom, he drives off. But as Anton's pointed out, these batteries are bolted in, not just bolted in, they're structurally adhesived into place. There's all these couplings and everything, and they're not quick disconnect couplings or anything like that. But CARB said, the California Air Resources Board said, oh, well, Tesla's got a battery swapping station. And as long as people are using it, we're going to max out and give you all these credits, and now you can go and sell them. No one has used this battery swapping station. No one. It's been sitting there for a year.
Well,
are they going to refund the credits?
Nobody used it over a period of time when it was examined, so we can't make the claim that nobody uses it.
So this is going to turn out to
I'll
be
go out on a limb and say nobody's used it.
All right,
So this is going to turn out to be a scandal, and Wall Street will react by raising
stock
the
goes up.
stock price. Yeah.
so according to Anton,
Scam government.
So by offering the swap station and claiming that 1 in 25 use it, with each swap taking less than 15 minutes, Tesla gets an extra 5 credits per car sold at a market value up to $5,000 a piece. So $25,000. That's $25,000 per car gift no other automaker gets, but rather has to pay Tesla.
ZEV credits it's floating Tesla. I mean,
and really, CARB did this whole thing of saying, 80% range within 5 minutes or whatever the refuel time is.
and that was really tied to hydrogen, wasn't it?
Yeah, exactly. They want to push fuel cells because they went, hey, look, we need zero emissions, and this electric car thing really isn't catching on like we all thought it would. So how do we game the system to really give an advantage to fuel cell cars?
And they're not doing well with hydroelectric power these days either. Right?
No, that's right.
But remember, there was that company Better Place that was predicated on the whole idea of just battery swap stations, remember? And they made a big deal out of that. And
It didn't work.
somehow didn't work.
It didn't work because you had to standardize the batteries.
Right.
And everybody said, yeah, that's a great idea. Well, let's standardize it on my battery. And it never went.
That's why Tesla wants anybody to have its technology, right?
How did the
Standardized
flashlight
batteries.
industry ever standardize on batteries, I wonder? You go buy a D cell, you buy a C cell, they're all the same, right?
Sort of.
It worked.
Well, if Sergio has his way, everybody will have the same battery.
I wonder how many flashlight companies went out of business after
Because they
the
wanted
early
to
days
have
of
a cell.
Yeah,
They had octagonal batteries.
right, right.
Hey, time to wrap it up. But great show. Todd Lassa,
John?
Scott Burgess.
Thanks for having us.
Both of you guys.
Yes, thank you.
Yeah.
Thanks.
And Gary, let's do it again
Next week, okay.
Cool. Thanks, everyone, for having tuned in.
Autoline After Hours is brought to you by Bridgestone Tires, your journey, our passion, and by the all-new 2015 Jeep Renegade.
Visit our website, Autoline.tv, where you can watch us live. Get your daily news fix with Autoline Daily and in-depth analysis and interviews with Autoline This Week. There's all that and much more at Autoline.tv.